Well, hello, everybody. Let's just see. I forwarded a link to a Google Drive folder, which has all of the documents and samples and stuff that I'm going to be talking about. There are so many things I didn't want to make it one great big, huge, PDF handout, but I also wanted you to have access to as much of it as you wanted. So you might want, if you want to follow along, you can click on that folder and then, here, you can click on that folder. I think I'm already doing that. Okay, cool. And then the other thing I just wanted to start with before we got into the fun part is this is a link to my YouTube channel, should be, where, oops, maybe I did that twice, just to make sure you got it, where you're gonna be able to find more of these videos. Check them out. If you like the videos, subscribe to the videos. You know what I mean? Say you like them. And if you have any other suggestions about things you might want me to talk about, let me know. So let's get into this. To start with, what kind of prompted this, as many things that I do, is interaction with agents, and I see issues that are coming up. And so I thought I would share some of this. And what triggered this in my mind is that a few years ago, there was a guy that went to my real estate school, got his real estate license, chose not to work with me and my group because he had a friend, knew somebody, an acquaintance who was an experienced broker, and that guy was going to mentor him, so he would go there, right? So he went there, closed one transaction. It was a multi-unit, 10-unit transaction. It was a very expensive transaction, about, $5 million. And now they are, the buyer is very unhappy and is talking, the lawyer words, right? And because what they found is that inside the property, that there had been a lot of work that had been done without permits and not up to code. And that the estimated cost to fix all this is like $150,000. They're unhappy, as you might imagine. So I was asked to take a look at the file, and I'm looking at the file, and there's an NHD report, and there's a prelim, and there's some stuff like that, but there's no property inspection in the file. There's no termite inspection in the file, no roof inspection, none of that, right? Now, the buyer had signed the buyer inspection waiver. Excuse me, the buyer had signed the buyer inspection advisory, right? We're going to look at these different forms, but as you may be familiar, the buyer inspection advisory is an advisory that we give to the buyer that says, we advise you to go get all these inspections, right? So there's actually boxes that can be checked. I authorize you, but anyhow, the buyer signed the buyer inspection advisory. Now, the question that I was being asked by this agent is, does the agent have any liability? Is there a problem? Let me just see. Can't hear anything. Can everybody hear me? I'm getting somebody who says they can't. I just want to make sure. If you can hear me, raise your hand. Yes, hands are up. So others can call in. All right, others can call in. How about that? Send private. All right. So now, by the way, one of the things that I'm going to do is to make this a little more fun and interactive, if that was even possible. I know what you're thinking, is that if you'd like to speak and answer to one of the questions I'm going to ask today, you could raise your hand and I would let you speak. If you'd like to type it in, I would like to get a little bit of interaction. So my first question to you, is this agent in trouble? Right? Is the agent who represented the buyer, are they in trouble? The buyer signed the advisory that said, we advise you to get inspections, but apparently the buyer did not get any inspections. How many of you think that by getting the buyer to sign the buyer inspection advisory, that the buyer's agent has done a sufficiently good job to protect themselves from maybe, being sued, right? How many people would say yes, that if you have that buyer inspection advisory, raise your hand, right? If you have the buyer inspection advisory signed by the buyer, what more can you do, right? Now it's up to them to do it or not to do it. That's good enough. I don't see very many hands going. Oh, I see some hands. Very good. I have to scroll a little bit. How many of you think, no, that's probably not good enough, that you should do something besides getting them to sign the form? Raise your hand if you're voting for there should be more done. Okay? And not everybody's voting. I've seen some people vote twice already, which, I'm just saying I'm paying attention to that. All right. So the answer is the agent probably has issues, right? Legal issues in this transaction. And my question for the agent was, now, first of all, if it's more than 4 units, a lot of times there's a presumption that you know what you're doing, right? So I asked the buyer's agent, has this buyer ever bought multi-unit properties before? And the answer was no. However, the buyer has bought many condos, single-family homes, things like that, rented them out, sold them, did things like that, but had not ever bought a multiple-unit dwelling. Now, having the buy, and the other question I asked the agent was, are there any emails between you and this buyer telling the buyer that they ought to get a termite inspection, a property inspection, a roof inspection? Is there any communication? And the answer was no. What should the agent have gotten? There's another form that should have been included in this transaction, which would have made me feel a lot better. I think made me feel a lot better. Does anybody know what that form is? It's got three, the initials would be good. If you know the initials to the form you would use if they were not getting inspections. That's it, very good. I'm proud of all of you. It's called a buyer inspection waiver, right? A buyer inspection waiver. So I want you to understand that without that, right, the 3 documents, and we're going to look at them, is you give them the buyer inspection advisory, right, which advises them to get inspections. You then give them a buyer inspection elections form, right, if they're going to elect to do inspections, so they can click out the inspections they elect to do. But if they choose not to do inspections, you need them to sign a buyer inspection waiver, right? Because what typically happens is they're going to say, we didn't know what we were doing. The agent never told us that we needed to do it. We never even read that form. It was buried at the end of a great big long contract. We had no idea what we were doing, right? And they're going to claim that you failed to use reasonable skill and care in order to protect their interests. So either your buyers have these inspections and reports, or they're a contractor or somebody else, right? Or they sign a waiver that makes it crystal clear that they've been told they ought to get it, and that sort of thing. Now, many times agents, let me start with this. So a client says to you, a seller, or a buyer, why do I need you to be my agent, right? There's 2 people that would like to buy and sell to each other, and you would like to get something, out of that. Why would they hire you, right? Now, if you say, well, I can help you write the contract, I have all the forms, they're going to say, we talked to a lawyer, they do it for $500. So what else can you do what can you do that the lawyer can't do? What is an area of real estate that you might be good at that a lawyer is not good at? And contracts obviously isn't it. Inspections and reports could be that area, right? You understand? Because that's something that the lawyer doesn't necessarily do. Now that presumes that you're good at inspections and reports, right? That's what that sort of assumes. And by the way, one of the main reasons some agents want to work with me, I have found, is because they want me to read the inspections and reports. And I should have said this at the beginning, but I'm going to go, I have some samples in the folder. If you have one of these out there and you would like me to look at it today, text me a link or email me a link, let me know, and I would go over your report, but I'll go over some general ones and point things out. So what that means is agents say to me, could you please read the inspection reports and tell me what I should say to the buyer? I get that a lot. I would prefer that you first tell me what you think you would tell to the buyer, and then we would compare our notes, right? And I'm going to go through some samples and just explain what kinds of words you would use in order to communicate this to a buyer. I've included, this is the thing on the screen is from an inspection service. This would be an area, by the way, that I'd get good at if I were, if you're not already good at. And this is just a brochure explaining about home inspections and what they inspect and what they don't inspect, and what they call specialty inspections, like mold and moisture and chimney and termites and sewer lines and the stuff like that. It's a good booklet that explains it, and you might want to read it, right? The document that we use in the business is called the Buyer's Inspection Advisory, right? The BIA. And this is the one that is attached to the residential purchase agreement. And it does say that you should get inspections, right? It does say that. And, but they either can or won't. The buyer inspection elections is the form that you would want to use if the buyer was going to do inspections. Now, when the market shifts, which it sometimes does, right? So the market goes up and then it goes down, then it goes up and it goes down, and people buy at the peak, let's say. Let's say it's been a really hot real estate market and there's multiple offers and people are making non-contingent offers, right? And they're bidding up the price. And so they buy at the peak, and let's say you're their agent. And then the market cools and it shifts and the value goes down, and maybe they lose their job, and now maybe they're not going to get very much money when they sell it, and they start going through the property and they're looking for some way they can get some money, right? And one of the things they'll start to look at is whether or not inspections and reports were done and what was told them about them. And and so if the buyer, if you convince the buyer that they ought to make a non-contingent offer and accept the inspections and reports of the seller without doing anything else, because that's the only way to get the deal, and then they sour on the deal, do you understand you might be mentioned in a lawsuit? Right, because their house is not worth as much and they find stuff wrong that they didn't know when they bought it. So at times in the past, I've actually had people initial next to the ones that they were not going to order, right? The form has improved since then, but you should have this discussion with the buyer and go through all of the different inspections. Do you want to check the lot size? I've known buyers that bought the house, and when it closed, the guy was an engineer, he went and looked at the plot map and he did his own math, and it was different from what it said in the MLS. It was obviously smaller. Well, you understand where that's going. So all of those things would be good to talk about. Do you want any of these, right? If you're the buyer. Now, there is a question is, if the seller has them, let's say the seller has a property, a termite, a roof, a chimney, they have them. The question I usually get asked is, should the buyer order their own as well? Now, there's a couple of ways to approach that. First of all, if a buyer says to me, would you recommend that I get more inspections or another set of inspections, I would say I would always recommend that you get a second opinion. However, we also could be a little more strategic about it. And what I mean by strategic is we're going to look at the property inspection and we're going to scan it. And what we're looking for are any items that the inspector has flagged for further inspection. Examples of these are often in electrical and plumbing, right? But they could be in other areas. So sometimes the home inspector looks at the electrical panel, and because of the make and the model and the year, it's on a list of electrical panels that may or may not be up to snuff anymore. And the inspector will say, I recommend that you have an electrician look at the panel. Right, then later there's some moisture under the house and it's near an area where the plumbing is, and so the inspector says, you know, there's moisture around the plumbing. I would recommend that you have a plumber look at that leak. Right, does everybody see where I'm going? Now, if you just go get another home inspection, you're probably going to be told the same things that the first one told you. So the conversation that I would have with the buyer is, look at, the guy thinks that there may be something wrong with the electrical panel. Why do you want to have a contractor go look at it? Right. Do you want to have a contractor go look at it? There's a crack in the foundation. Oh my God, see, the problem with home inspectors is, number one, they're not licensed, right? I don't know if you knew that, but you don't need a license to be a home inspector. They go through a training program, but they're pretty much unregulated. They're good at spotting stuff, but they have no idea how much anything is going to cost, right? Or for that matter, how bad is it, right? So if the home inspector sees that there's a crack in the foundation, they're going to take a picture of it and they're going to say there's a crack in the foundation, and we recommend that you have a contractor look at the crack. Right, and then your clients are going to look at it and go, oh my God, there's a crack in the foundation. The foundation is bad. It's horrible. The house is falling apart. Well, sometimes the contractor says it's $800, $1,200. We epoxy it. It's not a big deal, right? So my recommendation when I'm talking to a buyer is not just go get another set of reports that pretty much are going to say the same thing, but look at the items where we might want to get somebody who really does know what they're doing and can give us a bid as to how much it's going to cost. One of the agents said to me, it was the property inspection in the garage, there's a great big beam, a really big beam. And in this great big beam is a great big crack, a huge crack. So the property inspector takes a picture of it, says there's a great big crack in that beam. The agent is asking me, is that an important thing? My clients are scared to death, the house is going to fall down, right? The answer is get a contractor to go look at it, right? The contractor came, looked at it, and he said, no, the beam is decorative. It doesn't matter. It's not holding anything up. It's just the decoration, you don't have to do anything with it. You see, we are not, most of us, right, unless you have a contractor's license, we're not experts to the degree that we can tell somebody, is that foundation crack a good or a bad foundation crack? I'm assuming there's any good ones, right? How bad is it? And whether or not they should be worried, that would be the role of a contractor. So when I go through the property inspection, that's what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for anything where we might need somebody else to go look at the property, right? Just saying. So this document you want to use, and by the way, this is going to become more important because there may be some people who think they overpaid for a house recently. I'm just saying that people who purchased recently might come to the conclusion that they've overpaid, and the lawyer is going to, well, this is something they're going to look at, right? So that's the buyer inspection elections. And the document that wasn't in the other, that case I was giving you because they didn't do any inspections. This is the document that was missing from the file, right? This is the document that if they had, they would have been in a much better shape. Again, notice it keeps talking about the importance of property inspections. And it's asking them to initial that they are waiving this. Broker recommends the buyer get a home inspection, even if seller or broker has provided buyer with a copy of the home inspection. If you do not do so, you're acting against the advice of the buyer. Initial there, that you're waiving to get another inspection or to get an inspection. Same thing for the termite report. And there might be others, right, that you could write in, but those are the two big ones. It could be a chimney, it could be a foundation, it could be something else, right? And there are waivers of investigations. right? That they've already received these things and that they're not going to do any more additional investigations. Right there is a place for them to initial that they've agreed to that. So this form, how much of the inspecting can you do before versus going into contract, especially to it's a competitive market? Good question. I will get to that in a second. So to protect yourself from future lawsuits, you want to make certain that your communication to the buyer is you should always get all the inspections you can. People are, what, $1 million, right? What does a complete brace of inspections cost? $2,000 at the tops, right? Depending on how big, maybe only 1,200, depending on the size of the house. So you're making $1 million investment, and why not spend a few grand just to make sure the property is in good condition? And if they don't want to do that, you need to be able to prove. That would mean an email back and forth wouldn't hurt, that you have told them they ought to go do this. Now, how much of this can be done before versus after going? I was asked this question the other day. I don't know if the person is online. Sometimes it all blurs together. But the question was, well, if we go into contract, right? If we go into contract, can we bring an inspector by, right, before we put in our earnest money deposit so we can decide if we want to put it in or not? That's cutting it a little close, right? You understand? That's cutting it a little close. But is it legal? Is it possible for you to have a property inspection expected yourself before you make an offer, right? If I'm a listing agent and you call me up, and let's say I'm taking offers next Wednesday, and you call me up and you say, I want my own person to take a look at that. When can I make an appointment? I'll make an appointment for you to bring somebody by. Some of the buyers that I worked with that did this a lot, and we, by the way, we were doing fixer uppers. The guy would always bring his contractor with him, right? Because he had already looked at it. He brought his contractor with him, right? I'd sit in the car and they would walk through the house and talk to each other, right? Because they usually spent a long time. And when he walked out, the contractor had given him a written bid to fix everything that needed to be fixed, right? A written bid, right? That's better than a home inspection. I'm just saying. So could you, during the showing period, make arrangements to have either your own inspector, a contractor, or I don't know who else, to take a look at the property? Why not? Right? Ask the listing agent. Now, even if you make an offer with no contingencies, you still have the right to conduct the inspections. So yeah, in a competitive market, you would want to get a contractor to go look at it. Is the simplest way, because the contractor a general contractor you don't need an electrician and a plumber and a roofer and a foundation. You don't really need all of that to get a bid on a new electrical panel, a new plumbing. A general contractor can do that. So yes, the more of this. So you see, in the competitive market, there are two choices: contingent or not contingent. Right now, if offers were being made contingent to inspections more than they are now, you could take your time. You wouldn't have to do all this up front. But if you're going to make a non-contingent offer, then my recommendation to the buyer is we need to make sure before we're in contract that you really are satisfied with the condition of the property. Right, which might mean getting a contractor to look at it before you make an offer. That means you got to move fast, right? Move fast. Any questions about that form? In most big, well-maintained, regulated, supervised real estate offices, you have to have the inspections, or the waiver. Right, you understand? You either have the inspections or you have the waiver. Let me ask you, what else do I want to say about that? California Inspection Loan Brokers. We can look at some inspections in a bit. Let me ask you this question, though. So I'm selling a house. I'm the listing agent, And in the package of inspections that I'm going to put online is a termite report. And your buyer downloads the termite report and makes a non-contingent offer because it looks okay. And then and that's pretty much all we do. Is there anything else I needed to do if I'm the listing agent or the buyer's agent, other than give the buyer a copy of the report and have them remove that contingency? If I can prove that I gave the buyer a copy of the report and they remove the contingency, have I done enough? And the answer is no, I haven't done enough. Because somebody said to get him to sign the report. So did you know, I'll see if you guys know that, there's a law in California, there's actually quite a few, right? But and this is referring to California Civil Code 2905. Doesn't sound exciting. Pest control documentation in a real estate transaction subject to the real estate broker acting as an agent for the seller in the transaction shall affect delivery of the inspection report, certification, and the notice of work completed, if any, to the transferee, that's the buyer, in accordance with said sections. If more than one real estate broker licensee is acting as an agent of the transferor, that's the seller, the broker who has obtained the offer, that's the buyer's agent, by the transferee, that's the buyer, shall affect delivery of the required documents to the transferee, that's the buyer, unless the transferor, that's the seller, has given written directions to another. Well, anyhow, what this seems to say is that if I represent the seller or the buyer in a transaction and there's a termite report, I have to make sure that a copy of it has been given to the buyer. In fact, it goes on to say in civil, as soon as practical, the transfer or fee title or her or his agent shall deliver to the transferee a copy of the report. If noted, then it goes on to say that delivery to a transferee, that's the buyer, means in person or by mail or by a person authorized to act. And no transfer is invalidated solely because of the, so this is what's happening. The Department of Real Estate is on a fundraising spree right now. I'm going to be doing a class coming up on how the Department of Real Estate is using advertising regulations on real estate agents as a fundraising ploy, right? I'm not kidding. And one of the things that they're looking to do, because they like to charge fines for people, they will audit your office. And one of the things, they're going through your files, and one of the things they're looking for is there a termite report? And then they're looking for, is there proof that the buyer got a copy of it? Proof. And the fact that this was a part of a long, PDF that you sent to them, and that's not, they want one of two things. One of two things, the Department of Real Estate. Number one, they want the buyer to sign on the cover of the termite report saying that they got it. If you're a buyer's agent and you wondered why listing agents always wanted stuff like that, this is a reason, right? And if you're getting them to sign the termite report, why not get them to sign all the others? The other option is called the receipt for reports. And the receipt for report has a list where you can have receipts, of the reports. And so when the Department of Real Estate comes to snoop around and they see these termite reports and things like that, they want to see either a receipt for the report or the buyer's signature on the report. Is it possible to get copies of the documents you are showing? Yes, I'll paste it again. First of all, I assumed all of you were familiar with it, but they're all in a Google Drive folder, which I'm sharing with you, right? I think that's right. Send this to all. I'm sending it to everybody again. There you go. It's in a Google Drive folder that I'm sharing with everybody. And for those of you that, haven't, since, all right. All right. So we want to have this, by the way, is a good one to put in the file. We want to have a receipt that the buyer got it, and we want, or we want them to sign it, and we want it in the file because we don't want to have to deal with the Department of Real Estate, who's, likes to fine people. Let me ask you guys another question. You've been doing so well on, on my questions. The seller bought the house 10 years ago. And when they bought the house 10 years ago, they got a property inspection, a termite inspection, a roof inspection, all from the seller. They have since replaced the roof, remodeled the house, done all that, and they're putting their house on the market. And so they've got a property, a termite, a roof, all those inspectors to come out and look at their house, and it gives a clean bill of, this is a model house, right? My question for you is, those 10-year-old reports, do they have to, should they give it to the buyer today? Do they have to give it to the buyer today? It's 10 years old and they have updated ones which they're giving to the buyer. Is that good enough, or do they have to give the old reports too? That's my first question. Anybody you can vote on that if you want to. How about this? If you think they have to give a copy of the reports, even though they're old and out of date, raise your hand. See if we get, just trying to see if people are able to raise your hands. I don't see a lot of hands. How about if they don't have to give them a copy because they've got new ones and the new ones are better than the old ones? I think there's not a lot of voting going on in this group. I don't know. So do they have to give a copy of the report? The answer is yes, they have to give a copy of the old reports. Really? Yeah, really. First of all, if you were to read let me ask you guys this because you're a sharp group. What standard form that sellers signed say that they're going to have to give copies of all the reports they have? Anybody want to throw that out? Anyone know which those forms might be? All right, I'm overwhelmed with you. So one of them is the seller property questionnaire, right? The seller property questionnaire. If you read the seller property questionnaire, let's see, I'm not able to retrieve the Google files. Is anybody else having trouble getting the files from that list? I'm not, I don't know. Let's see again. Here, let me give you this. Here's the link. Copy the link. I think some people, let's see. We will send it out to you, but most of these are ones that you can. All right. So let's see if that works better. I thought this was going to work better, but you never know. Seller property questionnaire. As we scroll through the seller property questionnaire, we come to this section called Other. All right, I don't know why I don't have the. I hope that one worked. I hope so. Let me know. So the seller property questionnaire at the end under Other has this paragraph. Reports, inspections, disclosures, warranties, maintenance, recommendations, estimate studies, surveys, or other documents pertaining to the condition or repair of the property or any improvement on this property in the past, now or proposed, or easements, encroachments, If yes, provide any such documents in your possession. Any such documents in your possession. So it says that in the SPQ that you're going to give them copies of any reports. There's another document that you might be familiar with called the RPA, the Residential Property, the purchase contract. And one of the things in the purchase contract is a section that says that the seller has a certain amount of time to turn over any documents. I'm going to look at some of this a little bit later. What if, so the first thing I wanted to cover was that it doesn't matter. Next to the full drive, I did. I keep using that link. That's the link. That's the link right next to the drive menu. All right, I don't know what else to do with that other than, I don't know what else to do. All right, that's the link. We'll send it to you, but I don't know why this, it seems like I'm sharing the folder link, but I don't know why you guys aren't seeing the folder link. Let me ask you this then, another question. The buyer makes an offer without contingencies because there's inspections and reports, but the buyer goes and gets their own inspection. First of all, can you do that? If you make a non-contingent offer, are you allowed to also go and do inspections? And the answer is yes. And that's because in the residential purchase agreement, paragraph 14D5 says, and when we get to it, 14D5 says, B5, access to the property. It says buyer shall have access to the property to conduct inspections and investigations for 17 days. You see that? For 17 days. By the way, I virtually never see agents change that time period. So, and notice it says whether or not any part of the buyer's investigation contingency has been waived or removed. So even if there's no contingencies, the buyer can still go and do the investigations, right? Can still do that. Does the buyer have to give the seller a copy of those reports? By the way, many times you'll see in home inspection reports when the buyer has, it'll say this is confidential. It is not to be shared with anybody other than the person we're contracting with, right? This is confidential, you cannot share it. That's what the property inspection says. So if I'm a buyer and I paid for a property inspection, I don't have any contingencies because the seller already had one, and I paid for the property inspection and the property inspection says it's confidential, do I have to give the seller a copy? Anyhow, I don't want to. Do I have to give it to the seller? And we have a, what's this saying? I have to make this a little bigger to read. I don't know. So the answer is we have to give them a copy of any inspections and reports that we get. So during paragraph 12 says buyer's investigation of property and matters affecting the property. And this is a really long thing. But paragraph 12B, seller shall make the property available for all buyer investigations. Buyer shall, as specified in paragraph 14B, let me make this a little bit smaller, complete buyer investigations and either remove the contingency or cancel the agreement. And here's the good part, give seller at no cost complete copies of all such investigation reports obtained by buyer, which obligation shall survive the termination of this agreement. What that means is that if the buyer has made an offer with a contingency, with the inspection contingency in 14B, and then the buyer says, I've decided not to buy the house, and they cancel because they're not going to remove the contingency, they still have to give the seller copies of all the inspection reports they received. That's what the contract says, right? And it doesn't matter that the property inspector put in a little thing that said this is confidential, because that does not outweigh the obligation created in the purchase agreement for the seller or the buyer to do differently, right? Which is to give the other side a copy. What else? So let's look at a sample. I just picked some samples off of the internet. What do I look for in a termite inspection? Now, termite inspections are better, in my view, in some cases than a property inspection, because at least the termite people will tell you how much it's going to cost. And the reason they're going to tell you how much it's going to cost is because they really want to do the work. Most of the money, that profit that is made from a termite company comes from doing the work, not from doing the inspections. So this is just one that I downloaded off the internet. I don't know, maybe it's a sample, I guess. What I do when I get a termite report, you can see me doing it now, I scroll to the bottom. All right, first thing I do is I just scroll all the way down to the bottom. And what I'm looking for when we hit the very end, so this is the authorization. That's not what I'm looking for. All right, and that is something you would sign if you were hiring this termite inspector to actually go do the work. This is what I'm looking for. I want to look and see how much the inspector is saying that Section 1 work would be. I look at the number. Notice down here, it's a teeny number, 31,490. Right, so it's a, you know, a fixer-upper maybe. I actually have had a listing that had more than that in Section 1 work in San Jose. And I remember when I was explaining to the seller about what the buyer was going to do, the seller said, he's not going to live there, is he? You know, but anyhow, that's a hefty number. Now, if I see a number that is more than $2,500, first of all, that tells me there's probably tenting. When you see a number like $31,000, we're talking not only about, you know, the only reason this building is standing is because the termites are holding hands, but there's probably a significant amount of rot from a plumbing leak, right? I just want to know before I start reading the report, is this, you know, what are we looking at, right? Is it a few thousand? Is it 30,000? And then once I've seen that, and I've sort of went to the end of the book, right, to read, you know, who done it, then I'll start to go through the report. And what I'm looking for, primarily what I'm focusing on, is Section 1, right? And Section 1, for those of you that aren't familiar, there's a Section 1 and a Section 2 item. Section 1 means getting rid of all wood-destroying pests and organisms. There's two parts of that. There's pests and organisms. By pests, they mean insects. And there's two kinds of insects in our area that eat wood. There's termites and wood-boring beetles. But then there's also organisms, microorganisms that are eating the wood. When wood is rotting, microorganisms are eating the wood. Fungus are organisms eating the wood. Mold is not an organism that eats the wood. So does a termite report include mold? The answer is no. Will the termite people get rid of the mold problem? The answer is no. Mold doesn't eat wood, so they have nothing to do with it, right? So Section 1 means either rotting wood, fungus damage, or we got termites, right? And as you can see, they have subterranean termites, right, which is harder. They have fungus infection. There's a fungus among us, right? That's a Section 1 item. They have, so I'm looking for everything. Now, look at this, unknown further inspection. Ooh. So a raised wood sleeper floor constructed over the existing slab was noted in the bonus room. This type of construction prevents inspection of the wood members below the floor. Ooh. No representations can be made. So what I would be doing with my buyer is I would highlight this and I would say, would you want to get a further inspection, which would require opening the floor to perform the inspection? And then they'll issue a supplemental report. And if they say no, I will have them oftentimes initial electronically right next to that paragraph in the report that they are not going to get the further inspection. So in the termite report, the good news is they're going to tell us what they think it'll cost to fix the stuff that they found that was wrong, but then there's oftentimes areas for further inspection, and you want to be clear that you recommend they get the further inspection or that they waive it, right? We keep going. Here's a hall bathroom leaking at the shower pan, right? That's the damage, right, from the rotting wood and that sort of stuff. And they're recommending that you break out the stall shower and pan the tiled floor, $11,300, right? So basically this is needs a complete remodel of the bathroom, kitchens. So keep going. Section 1, 10,000, the masonry. This house is a mess. So unknown, 7A, further inspection item, right? Portions of the attic are not accessible, right? I would be asking the buyer, do you want to get a further inspection of the attic? We can have them when they go do the other one. Does everybody see what I'm doing with the report, right? I'm mostly focused on section 1 items for now. Right, I'm looking for items of further inspection because that's the part that oftentimes can come back to bite you, right? Because the buyer's going to say, well, they're going to find later that there was a problem that they would have uncovered had they done the further inspection. And then the buyer's going to say, well, our agent, he never told us to do it. He said we didn't need to do anything, that was just, we shouldn't bother, that, right? That's what they're going to say, right? And you want to be able to prove that you pointed it out to them and you recommended that they do it, and they said, no, we don't care, right? You get the idea, I think, of this, right? I'm looking primarily for section 1. Now, what is a section 2 item? A section 2 item is where there isn't an infestation of wood destroying pests or organisms now, but there could be in the future. Examples, like sometimes this is a really broad category because they'll see a bathroom that has a shower with a curtain rod, and showers with curtain rods have more moisture that get out than a stall shower would have. So the termite person is going to put down as a section 2 item the shower with the curtain rod. I'm not kidding, right? You know, if there's moisture under the in the sub area, they're going to say there's moisture in the sub area, and if you have moisture and you have wood and you have oxygen, eventually you're going to have rot. If you have wood chips, around the outside of the house, the section 2 is going to flag that, because it's like, what chumming is, where they throw the stuff over the boat to get the sharks to come. Well, throwing wood chips around your house, right, that haven't been properly treated is like chumming for termites, right? It's like putting bird seed around your house and then complaining the birds are on your car all day, right? So we're mostly interested in section 1. Section 2 are things that, would be nice. We're focused on further inspection items so that we can, we can point that out to them. West Side Home, I just download a couple of these. Here's, West Side, look at this. The report is intended only for the use by the persons named in the report, not intended for use by any other third party, and this would include distribution of the report to any real estate agent, property owner, homeowner, or any agent of such, right? Copyrighted. Right, now that is annoying, right? I've seen similar kinds of things on a bunch of different inspectors in our area, and that, however, has no legal basis, because first of all, the contract says the buyer has to give a copy of all the reports, and that contract outweighs this statement. Plus, it is a violation of the law for the seller not to give copies of the reports to their agent to give to the buyer, right? It's a violation of the law. So good, you put this in, but it doesn't really mean anything. Now, most good property inspections have 2 sections. If they oftentimes will put the big stuff, the main stuff, in a summary. Let's see if these people do it. And I admit, now this one I like, they in the red put the things that they think are important. Notice what they said here. A qualified contractor should review and make repairs. That should be a flag to you that you're going to want a contractor to take a look at this, all right? They've highlighted this, constructed, inspector recommends removal of planting beds, exterior drainage, see attached picture, roots. Consider evaluation by a qualified arborist, right? Anytime the property inspector says, have somebody else look at this, that's an expert in an area, you want to highlight that and show it to your client. There's a tree, there's vegetation, they have pictures, leaning fences. I've seen a lot that look like that. Here, a qualified contractor and repair gate as necessary. So what usually happens is you're making a list of things. Some contractors, by the way, you can send them a copy of the property inspection, especially the ones that have a lot of good pictures, and they'll give you an estimate just by looking at the pictures, right? I mean, they'll say, how much would it cost to put in a gate like that? You know, they'll give you an estimate. Electrical, a qualified electrician should review and make repairs as necessary, right? You see the problem with just getting another report, because if you just got another report, they're probably going to tell you the same thing. But that still doesn't get us an electrician or a contractor to look at it. And then there's pictures. Again, I eventually read the whole thing most of the time, but I'm definitely reading everything in red. Everywhere a qualified plumber. Now you do realize that a general contractor could look at the electrical and could look at the plumbing, could give you an estimate on the fencing, right? You know, they could do all that stuff. Keep going. Here's another qualified plumber recommendation, right? You get the idea. That's what you're really looking for. Another contractor, qualified contractor. So in a property that has this much stuff in it, you definitely would be saying to them, I want a contractor to go look at this before you've obligated yourself to buy, or you're going to have to sign a waiver. One way that would make this work more smoothly is if the listing agent, the seller, after the seller had gotten a report like this, had a contractor come out and make a bid on everything, so that you could present that to the buyer. We got a bid, right? Because what'll happen is if you're a buyer and you're looking at all that stuff, and you're trying to calculate in your head, how much is all that going to cost? How much should I lower my price by? How should I put this into my offer somehow? Do you understand? If you don't know, if you don't have any estimates really for all that stuff, that's kind of hard to do, right? You can estimate the termite work because they're going to tell you there may be some additional inspection, but all of this stuff really needs a contractor to look at it. What else? There's obviously roof inspections. They're pretty simple because they're not very long, and they generally tell you how long the life is remaining and what it will cost to fix it. Chimney, if you have one, right? Now, let me just say this about chimneys. The property inspector is going to look at the roof and look at the chimney, right? And a lot of them will say, we'll throw that in for free. Well, the roof maybe, right? Because a lot of it's visual. But the chimney, if you've ever seen a property inspector inspect a chimney, right? What the property inspector does, they have like a flashlight and they look up, they look up the chimney, right? You'll notice that property inspectors generally wear clean uniforms, right? Clean uniforms. They get their name badge, right? All that sort of stuff. If you've seen what a chimney inspector looks like after they've done an inspection, they're wearing special equipment. Right, they're wearing plastic coverings. They go down the chimney from the top and look around. And I have seen many cases where the property inspector chimney inspection said, it looks good to me. And when the chimney guy, the masonry inspector, looked down the chimney, said, this chimney it's got fire hazards, there's creosote, it's dangerous, there's cracks, it needs to be rebuilt, it's $5,000 to fix. Right, and by the way, you ought to, if there's a chimney, you ought to get a chimney inspection. I actually sold a house that was in Evergreen that was only 5 years old. The seller had bought it from the builder. They had a chimney, a fireplace, but they had never lit a fire, right? They weren't into that, right? They had plants there. And I recommended to the seller that they get a a chimney inspection. They said, we've never did anything, you know, and I said, trust me, you know, get one. We got one, and apparently when the builder built it, there was a building defect, and the chimney actually had a major structural issue. And because it was still covered, however, by the structural warranty, which is 7 years for a new home build. But you understand, even if they're like, we never used it, get one. Because what you want to avoid if you're representing the seller is, if there are contingencies, renegotiating the price in the middle of escrow. And the risk, if you're having no contingencies, if you represent the buyer, is that they're going to change their mind later about the house and accuse you of not encouraging them to get enough inspections. You see, those are the two, you know, the two sides, right? And if I was representing the seller, I would want to get bids if possible to be as clear as possible about what it might cost. What else do we have here? What other reports? Well, one of them, and I thought I had one. How about an NHD report? Do I have an NHD report? I thought I had one, but I'll bet I have a bunch of them. Right? How about, do I want to do that one? This one is closing soon. Maybe I'll use one of my own. I like property ID. I do. This isn't actually residential property, but it looks the same. Still in escrow. I just want to just go through because I get lots of questions about this as well. So they give you a summary sheet that basically answers the big questions. Is it in a flood area? No. Area of potential flooding because there's a dam failure inundation map. The answer is yes. So this is the question I get a lot. Right? Agents will say to me, you know, my buyer's concerned because it says it's in an area where there's a dam failure inundation, right? Is that bad or not? Now, if you look at the maps, pretty much everywhere in the cities in Santa Clara is a valley, right? For those of you that are in the Santa Clara area. And if you're in the flat areas and there's dams anywhere, you're in a potential dam failure inundation, right? I'm actually in Morgan Hill and we got one not very far. They're going to drain it, but you know, if that goes, I'm right in the path. So I've had people say, well, what should I say to a buyer who wants to avoid living, you know, in an area of potential flooding? And the answer is they have to live on the top of the foothills, the top of the hills. Right? Go up there, you'll be safe from tsunamis and flooding. But if you want to live down in the valley, this comes up often. If they really care, one of the things I like about Property ID is they have a phone number and the person can call, the client can call and ask them questions. Can you talk about foundation report, please? Sure. I'll do sure. Foundation reports. They don't do very many, there aren't very many foundation inspections anymore. What they do instead is they want to do, you're going to find if you try to, the people I used to have do foundation inspections now say, we just do inspections, right? We just do the same thing. So what they look for are cracks in the foundation. And if you study this, you'll find that some people think that horizontal cracks are worse than vertical cracks because it has to do with moisture getting in. But all the time, agents will say to me, I got to, you know, the house has a crack in the foundation. I'll ask, how old is the house? Last agent said it was built in 1963. Well, I'm not surprised that there's cracks in the foundation, right? And there's pictures of them. How expensive is that to fix? Can you fix it? Is it dangerous? Who could answer that question? And the answer is a contractor. If you want to get a foundation inspection, the contractor is a foundation inspector, right? I haven't found the ones that were specialists, just they don't do that anymore. They just do everything. Many of the times those cracks, what they do, when you, like I've had people say, oh my God, it looks terrible. And the contractor said, yeah, that's a bad one. I said, how much do you think? He said, I don't know, $1,200. I was like, really? $1,200? You know, we're thinking, you know, we're going to need a new foundation. That must be at least 50. And he's like, no, we just put an epoxy in. you know, and this one's big enough that we'll drill a little thing and, you know, put it, you know, and that's all we're going to do. Sometimes all they do is they put in an epoxy that hardens, and the problem is keeping the moisture out, right? And that epoxy you can buy is that there's actually settling of the soil in such a way that there's a serious problem. The other is natural settling of the foundation, which concrete oftentimes produces cracks. If it's the latter and there's just cracks, generally what they're worried about is moisture getting in because it'll make them bigger and they'll start to degrade the foundation. They epoxy that over. If it's a soil problem, and again, you're going to need a contractor to look at that. I had a listing in Mountain View where the pictures, I mean, the foundation was buckled, the posts were leaning over. Sometimes it's pretty obvious. But if you need a contractor to tell you these are actually serious cracks, there's problems with the soil. And then you can get a soils engineering report, like a soil sample, like they test ice cores and glaciers, and they pull it up, and by doing that they can actually determine how much the soil is moving around. There's parts of San Jose, I've had listings in Vista Park where this is, you know, somewhat of a common thing. I don't know if that was enough about foundation inspections. One of the things, if you're working with me or part of my team, I'll help you read these reports, right, and give you a little bit of guidance. But foundations aren't necessarily a big deal. It depends on whether or not it's a natural cracking from the settling or if it's actually a soil problem. Any others? Any other requests before I've gone on long? I haven't lost too many people yet. Was that all you wanted to know about foundation? Yeah, there used to be a guy there was only like 2 guys in the past that were doing foundation inspections. The last time I had a foundation that I needed to do, they told me we don't do just foundation inspections, we do a full property inspection. And that's because it's obviously, they can charge a lot more. All right, so a lot of the questions that come up about NHD, if you use Property ID or some of the others, they will actually answer questions on the phone. You want to be very careful, especially fire hazards and things like that. We didn't get into all of that, but you need to be very careful about telling people whether or not being, you know, right near in an earthquake zone is a problem or not. Let me just say this about earthquake zones and then I'll wrap it up. So we're in, you know, I grew up in Santa Cruz, so you know, earthquakes, right? We don't have hurricanes, we don't have tornadoes, but we have earthquakes. So there's no way to avoid that. If the property is close to an earthquake zone, I've been asked this question a lot, does that mean it's going to be a problem for the buyer to own it? My first suggestion is you should talk to the loan agent, because the lenders have these maps too. And the lenders, of course, are going to be the one putting in most of the money. So they're going to take the address of the property and drop it into their software, and they're going to determine whether or not they want to make a loan on that address based upon that criteria, or if they are going to make a loan, they're going to require that you get earthquake insurance. And so one way to look at this is, as a starting point, if the lender doesn't care, right, and they're putting in 80% of the money, if the lender says, oh no, that's not bad, we're good, well, take that into consideration. That's all I'm saying, right? You know, I don't know where you're going to live that you won't have any earthquake effects. You know, not in this area, I mean, not in the Bay Area, but, you know, how bad does the lender think it is, right? But we're not going to go through all of those, but these are, I'm going to have, by the way, I'll have one of my guest speakers, I'll have somebody go through the NHD report in more detail. Was that enough? I like doing this without the property inspectors here because I've had them do their thing. It's a useful thing to hear, but they don't always say the same things that and you know, I wanted to do it my way. If that's good enough for you guys, you warned me out. Next week, we're going to have something different. I don't know what yet. If you have a topic you would like me to talk about, please, let me know, because I'm willing to do requests. Other than that, I will see you guys next week. And by the way, my YouTube channel, where you can find videos, I've just shared with everybody. It wouldn't hurt for you to subscribe, like, get notifications, all that good stuff. Thank you, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.